Este é o Caleidoscópio de Canal África, com Remo Samo e João Yabalá.
A situação do ativista angolano Serrote José de Oliveira, preso desde julho, tem gerado grande preocupação internacional. Conhecido como General Nila e presidente do movimento União Nacional para a Total Revolução de Angola, Serrote iniciou uma greve de fome em protesto contra a sua prisão, que considera arbitrária. De acordo com a Anistia Internacional, o estado de saúde do ativista está a deteriorar-se rapidamente devido à falta de acesso a cuidados médicos adequados. Para discutir o impacto deste caso e o estado da liberdade política em Angola, vamos conversar com Dito Dale, ativista e defensor dos direitos humanos.
Nós estamos diante de uma clara estratégia de aniquilar o jovem, porque quando uma pessoa está doente, deve ser assistido. Ao não proporcionar esses cuidados médicos, o que é que o regime quer? Não quer que esse jovem saia livre e com vida da prisão, quer matá-lo.
De segunda a sexta-feira, das 20 às 21 horas locais, este é o Caleidoscópio de Canal África.
Tshepiso Makwetla winds it down on Africa World Hour, 9 to 10 p.m. It's time for Africa World Hour with Tshepiso Makwetla. Stay tuned for insights, impact, and inspiration right here on Channel Africa. Available on the Channel Africa app.
2100 hours Central African time. A very good evening to you. A warm welcome. This is Africa World Hour here on Channel Africa, the African perspective. And of course, what we do bring you here on the channel and on the show is the many voices, faces, and the perspectives that matter not only to you, but from the heart of Africa to all corners of the globe. We tell you the very latest developments in 60 minutes, and we'd like to hear your perspective as well. Reach out to us on social media at Channel Africa 1. That's on Instagram, on X, as well as other channels, including on YouTube. But you can also send us a message on +27 63 406 9126. Share your thoughts on some of the developments that we're covering. In fact, let's go straight to that. Our top stories this hour.
1 hour, one continent, one voice. Africa World Hour with Tshepiso Makwetla on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
We start the military government of Burkina Faso saying it has foiled yet another plot to kill President Ibrahim Traoré and destabilize the country. There have been multiple coup attempts against Captain Traoré, with the government accusing Ivory Coast of involvement as well. The BBC's Chris Ewoko has more details.
In a late-night broadcast, the Security Minister, Mahamadou Sana, disclosed a leaked military-style video showing soldiers who he said were preparing to assassinate Captain Ibrahim Traoré. Mr. Sana alleged that the conspiracy was orchestrated by former leader Paul Henry Damiba, who was overthrown by Traoré in 2022. He accused Damiba of mobilizing supporters after securing foreign funding delivered through Ivory Coast. Neither Damiba nor Ivory Coast have commented on the allegations.
In other news, more details are emerging on what impact the U.S. military operation to remove Nicolas Maduro from power might have on Venezuela's oil industry. The U.S. President Donald Trump says Venezuela will turn up to 50 million barrels of what he calls sanctioned oil to America. He says he will control the money raised. This comes after Trump said the U.S. oil industry would be up and running in Venezuela within 18 months. The BBC's Nick Marsh has more.
The oil arrangement that we've made with PDVSA on their sanctioned oil that they can't move. Understand, they are not generating any revenue from their oil right now. They can't move it unless we allow it to move because we have sanctions, because we're enforcing those sanctions. This is tremendous leverage. We are exercising it in a positive way, and we feel very positive that not only will that generate revenue that will be used to the benefit of the Venezuelan people, and we're ensured that that's what the case is, but it also gives us an amount of leverage and influence.
A new report by the UN Human Rights Office says that what it calls Israel's systematic discrimination against Palestinians in the occupied West Bank has been intensifying. The UN Human Rights Chief Volker Turk described the situation as a particularly severe form of racial discrimination and segregation, which he likened to apartheid. The BBC's Shaima Khalil reports.
This is the first time a UN rights chief has used the term apartheid to describe the treatment of Palestinians in the occupied West Bank. Volker Turk said there was a systematic asphyxiation of the rights of Palestinians, whether in accessing water, education, going to hospital, visiting family, or harvesting olives. He added that every aspect of life for Palestinians in the occupied West Bank was controlled and curtailed by what he described as Israel's discriminatory laws, policies and practices. This latest UN report said Israel treats settlers and Palestinians under two distinct bodies of laws and policies.
Two members of South Africa's parliament are expected to testify before the ad hoc committee investigating the wide-ranging allegations of criminal infiltration, corruption and political interference in the justice system in the country. These members are the Democratic Alliance Member of Parliament Diana Cole-Barnard and the leader of the National Coloured Congress Fadil Adams. The allegations were made by the KwaZulu-Natal Police Commissioner Lieutenant General Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi, and he implicated members of MP's committee chairperson Soviet Lekhanyana explains.
The amendment will also feature witness Honorable Kola Barnard and witness Honorable Adams. And then with regard to members of the judiciary, I think that if there is any evidence that compels us to call a witness before the committee, let's make that evidence available.
The Saudi-led coalition has carried out airstrikes in southern Yemen, where the internationally recognized government has accused a separatist leader of treason. Health officials say at least 4 people have been killed in the attacks. There's uncertainty over the whereabouts of Idris al-Zubaydi, who leads Yemen's Southern Transactional Council, which is fighting the government. The BBC's Sebastian Asher reports.
The past few weeks have seen southern Yemen moving to the brink of a new conflict, pitting proxies of 2 regional powers, Saudi Arabia and the UAE, against each other. In recent days, forces loyal to the internationally recognised government have largely retaken control of 2 provinces that had been taken over by the separatist STC. That operation appeared to go more smoothly than had been feared. In order to further defuse tensions, the leader of the STC, Idris al-Zubaydi, had been due to fly to Riyadh for talks, but he didn't board the plane. The Saudi-led coalition says he's fled to an unknown destination. The STC says he's in Aden, overseeing security operations.
Africa World Hour. Africa World Hour. Unpacking global headlines from an African perspective.
And now it's 6 minutes past 9. We start the program with this Moscow saying it's dealing with what it calls an anomalous situation in the North Atlantic, which features a high-stakes maritime standoff involving a Russian-flagged oil tanker that Washington and its allies have been tracking for weeks. According to media reports, the U.S. is making plans to try to intercept the oil tanker Marinera that Russia has claimed jurisdiction over. The tanker is said to be linked to a so-called shadow fleet of ships, accused of dodging sanctions on oil exports. The SABC news correspondent Dasha Chenchova is in Moscow with the Russian reaction.
We are on Open Views Audio Bouquet. Channel 628.
Moscow says it is closely watching what it calls a troubling situation involving a Russian oil tanker in the international waters. The Russian Foreign Ministry said it is, quote, really anxiously monitoring the anomalous situation around the Russian oil tanker Marinera, which it says is currently located in the international waters of the North Atlantic Ocean, sailing under the Russian state flag and operating in full compliance with the international maritime law. Despite this, Russian diplomats have drawn attention to what they describe as an unmotivated and excessive interest from the American and NATO military forces. The Foreign Ministry says that a U.S. Coast Guard vessel has been following the Marinera for several days. Officials emphasize that the tanker remains roughly 4,000 kilometers away from the coast of the United States, raising questions about the justification for such close monitoring. Moscow has stressed that freedom of navigation on the high seas is a fundamental principle of international law. The Foreign Ministry added that Western countries, which frequently declare their commitment to this principle, should begin by respecting it in practice. Russian diplomats say they expect all parties to act responsibly and avoid actions that could escalate tensions in international waters. Dasha Chernyshova, SABC News, Moscow.
And we unpack the situation now with former diplomat and conflict resolution expert, Dr. Kingsley Makwetla. A very good evening to you, Dr. Makwetla, and thank you so much for speaking to us. And of course, compliments of the new year to you.
Thank you, Tshepiso, and Happy New Year to you. Good to see you again.
So we're talking about erosion of international norms, and I say this based on the conversation that's been happening since the weekend following the kidnapping of the Venezuelan president. But what are we seeing here? So Russia says it is a Russian-flagged vessel, but there have been connections made with either Venezuelan oil or Venezuela. Exactly how should we be understanding the standoff?
Tshepiso, this particular ship, Bella 1, has been under pursuit by the United States since the 23rd of December, when it tried to approach Venezuela. It subsequently diverted its routes towards Bermuda, and it has been under pursuit. And it turns out, at first, the impression was that this ship is registered under Panama. Later on, it turned out that it has changed its flag to the Russian flag and seeking the Russian defense. And a week ago, the Russian Foreign Ministry made a note verbal to the Americans to stop pursuing this ship because it's literally under the protection of the Russians. Now, today we learned that this afternoon the ship has been intercepted and it has been taken over by the United States together with the United Kingdom, which then raises problems because 2 days ago, again, at Tshepiso, we learned that the Russians were deploying a nuclear-capable submarine to protect all their shipping activities between Venezuela and Russian federations. The Chinese are doing the same. So it really raises the stakes in terms of the potential of conflict between the superpowers and nuclear powers. That's where the danger is.
And just in terms of the UN Convention of 1982 on the law of the sea, so Russia claims a seizure of a properly registered vessel in international waters as a violation of maritime law. Now, given your diplomatic experience, your understanding, how the US is justifying the action, is it setting a precedent, one that already exists, or are we just really moving away from rule-based order?
Well, Tshepiso, though the US is not a signatory to the law of the sea, but there are different international conventions that really ensures easy access and easy maritime freedom. The United States has been a proponent of this freedom of maritime and allowing commercial ships and military ships to move around the world freely. But this creates a new precedent. And of course, it comes at a time when the United States has started to go and redefine again the Monroe Doctrine, that they control anything in the Western Hemisphere and that no one should interfere in that. The language has been very much emboldened. You may have heard that. Even today, when Marco Rubio was addressing the press conference, together with Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, they made it quite clear that they are cleaning up their own hemisphere. It turns out they are saying China is next, Cuba is next, and also Colombia is next. So we are going to see what's likely to happen. But it has created serious instability, including in Mexico, including in Canada. So we just don't know what's going to happen. So that's why the United States is starting to redefine their influence in the Western Hemisphere, not only influence, but their dominance and the intolerance to see anyone involved in that. Also, Tshepiso, Donald Trump has issued out about 3 conditions 2 days ago, that Venezuela should not sell oil to any of its adversaries, that they must stop the drug trafficking, and hold any engagement with U.S. adversaries. So these are really uncharted territories of extraterritoriality. The United States have taken it to a total different level. So the tension is likely to go on unabated.
And I just want to also understand, in your view, just how choppy are these waters? The U.S. action in Venezuela, many observers have raised the question if it doesn't open the way for Russia, China to behave the same, and what it's doing now in the Atlantic with Russia with the help of the UK. As you mentioned, it's rebranding of the Monroe Doctrine, it's a return to hemispheric control rhetoric. Does it mean that the US will not shy away from all-out war, because it says the use of military force is certainly on the table to protect American interests, as it puts it?
Well, the reference to a military option beyond the table, it was made with respect to Greenland and seizing Greenland. They've put two options on the table. One is for Greenland to be sold to the Americans, and that's unacceptable in terms of the Danish. Two, they are saying the military option is not off the table. Secretary Rubio is going to have a meeting with the Danes, he said, next week, to try to resolve this impasse. But it has created insecurity amongst NATO members. Remember, Denmark is part of NATO, and the Greenland is part of Denmark. And there's no way that the Danes would accept annexation of part of their territory. Of course, the US is raising question of national security. The US have always had access to the Greenland for any military since the end of the Second World War. So this is puzzling everyone. Of course, the argument is that there have been serious mineral and resources discovered along Greenland, including some of the rare earths and strategic minerals. And the Americans and President Trump has made it quite clear that they want access to those resources. So it's fragmenting the alliances within NATO. And I think I've heard even languages from retired generals from Western Europe saying if the US was to invade Greenland, Europe should go to war with the United States. And remember, it's actually rewriting the whole notion that liberal democracies don't go to war with each other. So it's changing even what scholars have always postulated, that liberal democracies will not go to war with each other. So here's a possibility of liberal democracies going to war with each other.
And Dr. Makwetla, I want to just go back to your original point that the entry of military force is just segregated to Greenland. But with this taking over the military action in terms of the Marinera seizure, the U.S. has reflected a willingness to project U.S. law enforcement and military power far beyond the hemisphere's traditional bounds. So it seems that you even mentioned yourself that it raises questions about who its next targets are. There is Cuba, there is Iran. There are questions being raised about where the US has clearly stated that it wants to take over. So what I'm trying to find out is it's been labeled as US cowboy tactics, the international bullying. Is it the willing to be that stubborn that it could even stoke a standoff, a military standoff with Russia, given the fact that it's trying to mediate through US President Donald Trump on the Ukraine war? And as you mentioned, the relationship with NATO, with European leaders. How does this all then, pan out?
Tshepiso, the military standoff between Russia and the United States is on as we are talking, because we don't know what will be the Russian response in terms of the taking over of this cargo ship earlier this afternoon, because the Russians are having their own submarines and the naval vessels that they've dispatched to protect their own registered ships. So we're going to see what's going to happen, because we're really scintillating on the possibility of the total outbreak of a third world war. Because once big powers start attacking each other and they have excuse me, nuclear capability, we're likely to see serious challenges. China has issued out also a very strong statement rebuking the US. China consumes large part of its oil from Venezuela, and there are contractual agreement between Venezuela, China, and Russia. So the contracts are between states, not between government. And given the posture that the Americans have taken, it's likely to compound this tension between these three countries. So the escalation ladder is definitely going up, given what happened this afternoon. So we will see at the diplomatic level if there will be any intention to try to reduce this tension between Russia and the United States, and between the United States and China. The United States can't afford to run multiple war on all fronts.
And just finally on that exact point, Dr. Makwetla, the fact that Russia itself has sent one naval vessel instead of and a submarine to meet the Marinara, instead of engaging directly with the U.S. Coast Guard once it moved on board. What does it tell us in terms of its strategic intent?
Well, we always say in conflict resolution, Tshepiso, that war is a failure of diplomacy. So one can only hope that as we are talking, there are diplomatic efforts to try to de-escalate and to try to find amicable solution amongst all these countries. There has to be an effort to give some face-saving solution to the Russians, because this has been a humiliation that one of their registered ship has been snatched in the presence of their navy. So it's likely to increase the tempers, but I just hope that behind closed doors, there are diplomatic efforts to try to de-escalate this and find a solution that is amicable, that will save everyone's face, because this we can't afford as a world. The outbreak of a third world war will be catastrophic.
And we hope we'll be speaking to you soon again over the next couple of hours, days, just as this unfolds. Thank you very much for your time and your insights, Dr. Kingsley Makwetla, who is, as I mentioned, a diplomat and a conflict resolution expert. So he's just sharing with us his thoughts on what is happening and what the regional implications are, and also global implications of the U.S. action, particularly against a Russian vessel. And that brings the time to 21 minutes past 9.
Africa. It's time to plug into the heartbeat of the continent. Tune in to Channel Africa, your go-to radio station that broadcasts in 5 different languages.
L'Afrique du Sud célèbre la journée nationale du
Kabla hujaitwa kwa jina la Double K,
or more of our forests have been destroyed.
Partido Africano da Independência da Guiné.
See, Channel Africa represents every corner of this amazing land. From Lagos to Cape Town, Nairobi to Dakar, we've got you covered with the freshest news, music, and cultures. So, turn up the volume, feel the rhythm. Enjoy the conversation. Channel Africa, the African perspective. We are on Open Views Audio Bouquet. Channel 628. 1 hour, 1 continent, 1 voice. Africa World Hour with Tshepiso Makwetla on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
23 minutes past 9. You are listening and watching Channel Africa, and we are indeed on the DSTV Audio Bouquet 802, but you can also stream live on YouTube at Channel Africa is where you'll find us. And we continue with developments around the African continent and beyond. This time you look at the newly re-elected president of the Central African Republic, Faustin Touadera. He has invited Russia's President Vladimir Putin to visit his country. That's according to media reports. Moscow has become a key ally of Touadera in recent years, with the Central African Republic in 2018 becoming the first West and Central African nation to bring in Russia's Wagner mercenaries, as the chronically unstable nation sought to fend off several rebel groups. For a look at what the election really means for the citizens of the Central African Republic, we're joined now on the line by African Center for Governance Election Observation Mission Deputy Head Tendai Mbanje. A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for speaking to us.
Good evening, and thank you for having us.
Let's just first start with your reading of the election itself and the results that have just been announced.
I feel the election was an election, one of the unique elections that we have had on the continent. Remember, election is about context, it's about issues. This election is happening in a country that has a history of armed conflict, has a history of instability. It is a nation that was at the brink of genocide at some point because of civil war and so forth. We had an incumbent president who came in and stabilized the country. So the citizens were torn between continuity of stability or change, but also the change was anticipated with skepticism due to the fragile nature of the peace and the political environment in Central African Republic. So the results, they somehow truly reflect the outcome. I think President Todera was a popular candidate in this election, despite that he had his own issues. He manipulated the process by changing the term limits in the Constitution in 2023, and also used the incumbency advantage to be able to reach out to all corners of all the provinces of the country that the opposition did not. But despite that, he remained a popular candidate.
And some publications are talking about the election as Wagner's Africa's success story. And I'd like to hear your thoughts of that, as you mentioned the allegations or in instances what has been said to be proof of manipulation of the poll, the boycott of it as a result by the main opposition BRDC, who have pointed to fraud. How are we to read the success, and what are points to in terms of the President-elect Todera's legitimacy?
So indeed, let me start by commenting about the issue of the Wagner Group, and there are Russian mercenaries as well as the Rwandese soldiers who have been operating in the Central African Republic, giving it stability. I think it's a success story for them because it's the extension of contract. It's an extension of working relationship between them and the incumbent President Todera from that perspective. And when you're looking about the issue of election manipulation, it's very hard for the opposition to just claim manipulation without evidence. Look, this is a country that is so vast. I remember checking the statistics that the United Nations gave. They had 84 airlifting of election material through helicopters, 84, and several logistical arrangements that need to be supported by the UN that the demographics could not allow smooth logistics of movement because of the road is not some terrain, there's no road, some there are rivers, some it's just a very tough terrain that could not be accessed easily. So these are the places that Todera was able to penetrate, and yet the opposition, because of being under-resourced, they could not penetrate such areas. So claims of fraud without evidence, I think they ought to be dismissed. They must acknowledge that they were under-resourced. They went into this election fragmented. They were also not well coordinated. That is what it's not to praise or not to be on the defense of the incumbent, but also studying opposition parties that contest elections in Africa. I've come to realize that in most cases, they like to sing a song of fraud without substantiating such allegations.
So I'll ask you two questions in tandem, but it's really to do with the electoral process and, of course, the outcome in terms of the environment, the conditions under which those polls take place. There is the turnout that has been put at 52.4%. What does it speak to in terms of legitimacy or the strength of a mandate? But there's also the fact that while AU observers described the polls as peaceful, there were reports of violence in areas like Bambuti and reports of disenfranchisement of voters in some of those counties.
Obviously, in most cases when the turnout is 52+%, the people or experts tend to question the issue of legitimacy comes into play. But look here, if you look at how both the opposition, Prime Ministers Dogele and Dondra, they scored about 18%, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's 18%. So that tells you that the margin was quite, the margin in which Todera won was quite a big opposition combined, the main contenders combined. So I think that tells us that the question of legitimacy should not be an issue. And if you also look at the campaign messaging of Todera, it was about security. You are scoring deals with the rebel groups. So the people felt like they needed some continuity in terms of stability. You know, you can't build economy on a fragile political environment. So I think in terms of planning and in terms of the messaging, I think it resonated with many people. Although the young people felt like they wanted a change in this particular election. And so even though the African Union is said it was calm and peaceful, I think it's reflecting most of the demographic that they observed. The few incidents that we are pointing out, I think it's in terms of our assessment of credibility, it's insignificant. The magnitude it does not affect the overall outcome of the process, because it's just one tiny province or one tiny place that was affected. So I do think in terms of credibility standards of the process, of the entire process, that does not in any fact affect the overall assessment of the entire process. So to a large extent, we could safely say that the process went well, despite that small or those little incidences of violence, which were mainly caused by the rebel group, a certain rebel group.
Long-term democratic prospects, particularly in terms of the foundation from the constitutional referendum that scrapped the term limits, vis-a-vis what has been seen as Twadera's campaign, which lent, in some cases, people have described as heavily on the support of external military forces. How does that project the future for the Central African Republic?
This is a very good question. I do think that as it stands, Todera's messaging that led into the election victory is not sustainable. I think he scrapped the term limits, which will allow him to run for next time and so forth. I think in terms of the democratic fabric, building the foundation of a democratic society, I think it's not sustainable. We need strong institutions, we need constitutions that regulate power. he has been rightly said, like you say, that the support that he has received from the external support is also not sustainable. So I think there's need for a consensus among the people. He needs to also have an inclusive process of dialogue, even with those that he has defeated in this particular polls, including the remaining two rebel groups that are still fighting, so that there is a total process, inclusive process that takes the country forward, and including a review of regulating powers of the president, for example. So those are some of the things that even rebel groups, they feel like if the president has so much powers, they want to fight because they feel like they are not going to be heard in some instances. It is very dangerous in trying to build a democratic society where you over-concentrate the power in the office of the president. So I think a lot needs to be revised in terms of the office of the president, in terms of the constitution itself, which he tampered with, and in terms of an inclusive dialogue that includes those that have discontent about how this process has gone. I think what we can do is to get external support. The United Nations is there, the African Union, and other international partners could facilitate an inclusive dialogue process. Because as it stands, we cannot have another election where someone who, or him or whoever is going to replace him, campaign based on issues of peace and security. I think the Central African Republic needs to transcend issues of peace and security and start talking about prosperity, economic prosperity, and other things that other nations are benefiting and enjoying. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Tendai Mbanje is the African Center for Governance Election Observation Mission Deputy Head, and he's just reflecting on those post-election results that were announced in the Central African Republic and what it means for the country going forward in terms of its political landscape and, of course, for the citizens of that country. It's 24 minutes to 10.
Africa at Play with NETO chairman.
Africa Cup of Nations Morocco 2025. Bafana's opening match is against the Portuguese-speaking nation Angola on the 22nd. What can we expect from Hugo Broos and his charges?
When we went to the previous tournament, we sort of had the underdog tag as a country, and we were a little bit humble. Expectations were not as high as they are now at the moment. So I just felt that players were in a good space psychologically. I just feel that Bafana will still be tournament favorites. But coach Hugo Broos has a lot of work psychologically to make sure that players remain focused, humble, and players are playing without any pressure. Because when South African players are very creative, then we know that the outcomes are very good. But when they are under pressure, we know that sometimes the outcomes can be what we don't want to experience.
Coach Tshepiso Makwetla.
Live every Saturday and Sunday from 2 to 5 p.m. Central African Time. 1 hour, one continent, one voice. Africa World Hour with Tshepiso Makwetla on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
And it is 23 minutes to 10. We continue with Africa World Hour, and this time to the southern tip of Africa. That's where South African President Cyril Ramaphosa has defended his appointment of Advocate Andy Mothibi as the country's new National Director of Public Prosecutions, describing him as one of the most outstanding legal minds in the country. Speaking at the African National Congress's January 8 Presidential Golf Day in the Northwest Province, Ramaphosa cited Mothibi's extensive prosecutorial, judicial and leadership experience, as well as his successes at the helm of the Special Investigating Unit as the basis for his confidence in the appointment. This comes as the country's civil society group, Corruption Watch, has expressed concern at Mothibi, particularly citing the fact that he had not even applied for the position. To speak about this, newly appointed Executive Director of Corruption Watch, Lebogang Ramofoko, joins us to speak about this. A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for speaking to us. So let's start with the importance of not only applying for the position, why that is important, but also I want to look at his record at the SIU. Advocate Mothibi, does it meet the constitutional threshold in terms of fit and proper required for an NDPP?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. We note as Corruption Watch, the surprise announcement by President Ramaphosa. He has stated his reasons, and we also, agree that Advocate Mothibi brings a wealth of knowledge and experience, having been at the helm of the SIU since May 2016. We have seen how he has led that the SIU, and basically how we have seen that he has led it with a lot of integrity. But that is not our contention. Our contention is the fact that as Corruption Watch, we have always felt that it is important that there is transparency in appointments of key personnel. We have also noted in the past while how confidence of the public in the NPA has dwindled given its past performance. And it was extremely important that there is a panel, and a panel basically meets with the shortlisted candidates, not to test them on their knowledge and experience in terms of, the law, which are some of the things that President Ramaphosa mentioned, but also how the incumbent is going to instill the confidence that is needed in that office. And denying us the opportunity of the person that the president has chosen does two things. One, the president then goes back on his way of making the process a transparent one. And secondly, is that does not give Advocate Mothibi that opportunity of telling us as a public, and the public standing behind him around what he is going to do to really bring back the confidence and the integrity of such an important office.
Okay. So let me jump in and interrupt you and ask this. So you are saying that this lack of public scrutiny does take away from the president's expressed promise, that is, of transparency. But I'm asking, though, if there was an advisory panel that did exactly that, interviewed 6 candidates and found none suitable, would it have made the Advocate Mothibi more suitable if we had seen him tested by a panel publicly? I'm just trying to understand the legitimacy aspect of it, and you can tell me procedurally how you view it as Corruption Watch.
Thanks for the question. Certainly, it does. It does not take away from him as a person and his track record as the SIU and his wealth of knowledge, legal knowledge. But if you recall all the interviews of the 6, for the panel to get to a point where they actually said to the president, we could not recommend any one of them, is that each one of them were asked a variety of questions. Some of them, particularly around those who were at the NPA, around how they are going to build back the confidence of the NPA. And so, we are saying that yes, we acknowledge that he brings a lot of wealth of knowledge and experience, but you need to give us an opportunity to all of us as a public, given the office that he's going to occupy, given the disappointment that the public has in the office at the moment, for us to hear what his plans are. What we have right now is a performance of a different unit, but we have not heard him answer questions around how he's going to turn the NPA around. That is what is lacking in this process. But what is also lacking, it's a commitment in this country to be very transparent, which is something that Corruption Watch has been pushing around how we make appointments of certain individuals, particularly in key positions that are going to fight corruption and maladministration in the country.
So the panel's advisory panel's findings, do you believe that they produce a preferred outcome? And in that, I want to ask this question as a follow-up, that the leadership success which the president pointed to of an investigative body like the SIU, do you believe that he's saying it translates into a prosecutorial independence at the NPA, and do they share the same culture?
Well, I mean, I think for me, with everything that the president has done, we would first have to wait for Advocate Mothibi to start his job, and we would need to hear from him around how all of these plans are going to basically unfold. I think, unfortunately, in South Africa, what we have seen is that there is a lot of talk, a lot of commissions, and a lot of promise around what is going to transpire and what is going to happen in future. And in a lot of ways, unless there is public scrutiny, unless the public is taken into the confidence of all of the leaders, we see all of these promises sometimes either being hollow or not being followed up. The one example is, the confidence that we had in the Zondo Commission and what it uncovered. Until today, we have not seen serious prosecutions that come out of there. So, I mean, I think all of us can say the speak probably sounds correct, but our insistence on public scrutiny and public transparency is that we would need to see that the things that are being spoken about are indeed implemented.
And this happens within an environment of a very fragile justice system, especially given what's coming out of the Matlanga Commission. So that does infer a lot of pressure, but does he have the capacity, and I'm talking institutionally, to bring about that stability, that to shore up confidence in the NDPP? What are your thoughts on this?
Advocate Mothibi certainly brings a wealth of knowledge and experience. I think in the absence of him appearing before the panel and being asked the questions that you are asking right now, what we can do is to be cautiously hopeful that what he will do, given the feedback that the public and other groups are giving, that he will start by giving us what his plan is going to be, so that we all have the confidence that he is going to prioritize what, for many bodies is important. One is rebuilding the NPA, rebuilding it in such a way that there is confidence in it, that is going to take up the public seeing public prosecutions beginning to happen from commissions that have cost us a lot of money, like the Matlanga, not the Matlanga Commission, but the Zondo Commission that was in earlier years. We would want to see some of the issues that the previous NPA members who were interviewed around how that organization is at the moment being addressed. There has been, a number of allegations around its capacity to do its work. We expect, and that is why for us it is so important that we continue to push for transparency, that he will unveil his plan, and not only will he unveil his plan, he will also walk the talk of reporting back not only to the president but to the public around what are some of the changes or the achievements, including some of the challenges that he may be facing. We would like to see him working with the legal, the criminal justice and the judiciary and everybody in the entire value chain, and making sure that he takes up issues. We really desperately need to have confidence that the NPA is not, is not like a sitting duck, but it's something that can work, and it's a body that will fulfill its mandate for what it was set up for.
Just very briefly, if you were to impart advice on what he ought to tackle first, because there is prosecutorial morale that is lacking due to pay disparities, poor working conditions, we believe, overwhelming caseloads, the legal risks that comes with this leadership role. What should be his first port of call? Very briefly.
He's going to need to build a team around him that is going to support his vision. He's going to have to share a vision, and that vision will include a number of key changes and key issues that he's going to tackle. He's going to tackle first, and once he does that, we will know, whether or not, he is going to turn the NPA around.
Really, thank you for your time. Much appreciated. Your thoughts, your insights. Just speaking to us about the appointment of a new National Director of Public Prosecutions in South Africa. That's the newly appointed Executive Director of Corruption Watch, giving her insights. Lebogang Ramofoko.
As 2025 draws to a close, we pause to honor the spirits that connect us.
Let's get it started.
The festive season reminds us of what truly matters: family, community, and unity. No matter where you gather or reflect, Channel Africa is with you. Bring you stories and voices that are shaped by the African perspective.
Something significant happened on this day. Asanda, you were a baby, I'm sure. I'm not even sure if you were born. No, you were a baby, yeah.
Yoga. Matseko is still trying to convince me.
No, I've done that already, and you're going to come now on the journey.
I will try.
From all of us to all of you, may your season be safe and peaceful. Channel Africa, the African perspective. The sound of Africa is evolving. Experience our new mobile app. Free to download, free to connect. Tshepiso Makwetla winds it down on Africa World Hour, 9 to 10 p.m.
And as we wrap up the show, we turn our attention now to the plains of the Amboseli, where a giant has finally come to rest over the weekend. Kenya and the global conservation community were hit with the news of the passing of Craig, one of the world's last surviving super tuskers, as he was called. Born in 1972, Craig was a living monument of Africa's wildlife heritage, famed for his majestic ground-sweeping tusks and a calm, dignified presence that made him a beloved ambassador for Kenya's wildlife. He lived through decades of poaching threats and environmental change, ultimately dying of natural causes at the age of 54. A very rare and profound victory for the conservation efforts that protected him day and night. And to speak about Craig, his life, his final days, and what the loss means for the future of elephant conservation in the Amboseli ecosystem, Paul Wambi is Assistant Director of the Amboseli National Park. A very good evening to you, Paul. Thank you so much for speaking to us. And my first question really was, when did Paul meet Craig, and how did that affair continue?
Yes, good evening, and thank you very much. I'm happy to be with you here and to talk about Craig and conservation in Kenya. Now, Craig was very important animal for us. It was a big tusker. Actually, we call it a super tusker. Mm-hmm. It was big in size. The tusks were ground sweeping. It was loved by many. Actually, everybody visiting Amboseli was jostling to have a share of Craig. So it was a very special animal to us. Many of the tourists, enjoyed photographing Craig, filming Craig. And amazing is that in many occasions, Craig would also, just be waiting for the photos. So he loved being photographed by the visitors. And, many occasions also, he would even move closer to visitors, move closer to tourists who wanted to have a share of Craig. So we also think that probably Craig understood that people needed to interact with him and that people needed to have a share and experience of him. So it was unfortunate that we lost Craig, but we are happy that there was a serious protection around Craig and others, and that the government, the local community, the local partners were able to work together to ensure that Craig is protected and that he dies a natural death at 54. Mm-hmm. So I think it is something very important to share with the world, and this is just part of the story that we wish to share with the world, that it is possible to take care of some of these iconic species to the extent that they live and die a natural death. Thank you.
And I want to talk about, we spoke about his role, importance within the ecosystem at Amboseli. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? And just from not only conservation point of view, but historically, the young people who were able to experience him, what you would have taught them about the importance of Craig as, a pachyderm, his role within that environment, etc., etc.
Yes, as I've already said, Craig was highly loved by the local communities. I think part of the reason why they highly loved him is because of his calm nature. And because of that, he was really loved by many of the local people who would track him on a daily basis. He also must have learned that human beings have no problem with wildlife, because in many occasions, people would tell me that Craig is docile, that Craig is very polite, and indeed that was his nature. So I think with interaction, with proper care, and it's possible that wildlife and people can live together with respect with each other. And Craig was a classical example. So despite the fact that it was huge in size, very intimidating trophies or tasks, I can assure you that the behavior was completely different. And I think this is a lesson to the next generation, a lesson to this generation, that yes, it is possible to live peacefully with nature, and once we respect each other, then the interaction becomes very cordial. That is a lesson we can share with the next generation.
Just in terms of Craig, did he have any offspring? Are there prospects of that offspring having as large tusks as he had, for instance?
Yes, Craig fathered many offsprings during his life. And of course, we are looking forward to having other super tuskers. Currently, we have one which is 38 years old called TJ. And we are looking forward to having, the sons of Craig take over from Craig. And, Amboseli basically has had a history, of, very huge tuskers. So we had Tim, now we have Craig. And we think that as we move into the future, now the sons and the grandsons and the other offsprings will be taking over, from the ones which have already passed on.
So the importance of super tuskers, again, I mean, surely it can't just be about, obviously, the wonderment of seeing an elephant with ground sweeping tusks, but just to teach the public about, the importance of protecting super tuskers from, as we mentioned, poachers, and the importance for the species, etc.
Yes, you see, this is genetical. The super tuskers are becoming rare, and these are genes which must be protected by everybody. So it is important that because they are very rare and they are very few, that we all work together as people of this world and ensure that we protect these super tuskers for the generations to come. So we've noted that they are becoming few, and if these few genetic, strengths are allowed to disappear, then I think we will have no super tuskers in the near future. So I think it is special. They are very special, because of course we have to ensure that that genetic pool is thriving and is able to survive. And again, as I've already mentioned, in terms of tourism attraction, in terms of conservation, the super tuskers are just, something which we all have to appreciate as a world natural heritage. And we must work together to ensure that they survive and thrive.
Well, we thank you so much for your time and just giving us that lesson, not only in introducing us to Craig. If you don't know who Craig is, Paul Wambi is the Assistant Director of the Amboseli National Park in Kenya. And just for Shayla's benefit and those who may not, so this is Craig. When they say super tusker, this is what they mean. Yes, so that's like ground sweeping tusks you have never seen. Actually, I think it's only in those what do they call it? You know, those dinosaur age, kind of, what do they call that era?
What?
They used to call them mammoths.
Yes, mammoths. Yes,
yeah,
yes. That's
so
what I was
he
thinking
looks
of.
like a mammoth because
Wow.
of how huge those tusks are.
That's one of a kind.
So please do, if you are listening, go and Google Craig and just see the beauty of it. I think he died at the age of 52. Would have loved to see an animal like that, and apparently he loved the photos.
Oh yes.
And he fathered many children.
Okay. All right. Hopefully we'll have more ground sweeping tusks.
So that's what they're hoping for. But anyway, that's us, Africa World Hour, handing over to African Diaries. What's coming up this Wednesday? I didn't realize it was Wednesday today.
What day did you think it was?
I thought it was still on Tuesday.
Oh my, no, ma'am.
I know.
The week needs to finish.
I was tortured from the last time, so I'm like, but I'm like, Wednesday, love it for us. So
on the show today, we're going to be looking at hyacinths and how this particular plant is drowning the Tshepiso Dam. However, there's a creative collective led by Mothape Motokwe, and they are creating baskets for support. And so they're taking these plants and they're repurposing them, and we're going to find out more on that. Then in the second hour of the show, we speak to renowned casting director Salai Rala, and we just find out the biz of TV screens, films, and of course the industry that we're in actual fact.
Okay, well, looking forward to that. Shayla and Kumana coming up right now. It is 10 p.m. Time for us to say goodnight for now. Until the next time.
Conversations that touch the heart and inspire change. Here on African Diaries, only on Channel Africa. Join us on www.channelafrica.com.